Okay. My name's Glenn Morrow, and I am preparing to teach the Bat Honor. Been asked to try to upload as many videos as I can that would help other Pathfinders earn some honors in this difficult time with the virus. So got to thinking that one honor I could prepare and present is an honor that I have already prepared and presented up at Oshkosh. In 2019, I presented this honor. Actually, a year prior to this, I presented this honor to the Wisconsin Pathfinders. I believe it was at the Fall Camporee, and kids seemed to enjoy it, so I polished it up a little bit more and presented it at Oshkosh. Started out with, I think, 20 seats, and it was proved to be pretty popular, and we had to upgrade to a bigger booth, and we had full classes every day that it was open. So I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even Sabbath afternoon we spent time teaching it. So I hope that that the folks who saw it gained a blessing out of it. I can tell you that this picture that you see here, I think his name was Mike. He was the very first guest that we had. As soon as they opened the gates, I think it was Tuesday morning, he made a beeline, or maybe I should say bat line, straight to my booth. And he was first in line, and he's from, I believe, Southern California. So if you know Mike, let him know that he's now famous. And I appreciated him because he started off the week right for the enthusiasm. I can't say that all of the people that showed up to see the honor were as excited about bats as Mike was, but even the ones that were, ew, bats, they're yucky. Hopefully by the end they came to realize how good God is for giving us the bats, and we're very lucky that we have bats that we do. So I was hoping that everyone had an appreciation for bats when they left the honor. Before I get started, I also want to thank Bob Moore. Bob is a retired professor from Andrews. I believe he taught math, and he lives in Berrien Springs. And when I was looking to teach the honor, I contacted the folks in charge of Oshkosh, and I says, hey, I've got this honor. I think it'd be fun to teach, but I need some help. And they were able to find Bob, and Bob was awesome. Bob studied on his own. He came prepared. He knew more about bats than I probably did. Matter of fact, he knew more about bats than I did when he showed up at Oshkosh. And he taught me some things as we taught the honor. More importantly, because of such the hectic, chaotic frenzy of Oshkosh Week, Bob, if it weren't for Bob, this would have been a total failure. And a couple times a day, Bob would actually teach the class for me, and he was really awesome and huge help, and he would keep everybody occupied as they were waiting for the next class to start. So if you know Bob, tell Bob how much we appreciated his work up at Oshkosh. So with that, I guess I'm going to get started. As I was up at Oshkosh waiting for each group to start, I had a couple of jokes I would tell. That would allow time for the stragglers to come in and find the last remaining spots and chairs and such. So two jokes. One joke the adults, especially the pastors, really seem to like, and the other one the kids really seem to like. So I'm going to tell both of them here. So first one goes is that there were three pastors sitting around having lunch one day. And the pastors were saying, we've really been having a problem with bats. First pastor, he goes, I've got bats outside and they just fly around at night. It's gotten to where the old ladies and even the young ladies, they don't want to come to church at night because of all the bats flying around, that live in the bell tower. I've bought everything I can figure out off the internet. Nothing seems to work. Second pastor, he goes, you think that's a problem? I actually have bats inside my church. It's just crazy. And I've called exterminators. And it seems like the more exterminators I call, the more the bats multiply. Third pastor, he goes, I used to have the problem. He said, we had them inside and outside the church. They were in every closet. They would fly around during the service. Really distracting. It's just, we called the exterminators. We tried all the gadgets off the internet. Nothing worked. And finally, one day, I figured it out. I got all the bats together, and I baptized them. I gave them Bible lessons. I baptized them, and then I gave them all offices to do in the church. And that's been about 9 months ago. And I can't tell you the last time I've seen a bat in my church. So the adults seem to like that joke. Hopefully you found that funny. It's kind of hard to tell on a video, so I can't see your reaction. So the second joke the kids seem to like were you're going to find out in this bat honor that there's really only three species of bats that like to drink blood. And out of the 1,300 species, only three of them. And so this joke is about a colony of bats that like to drink blood. And so, but they're starving. It's been a long time since they've seen anything and had any blood, and they're in the cave just starving. Finally, one day, one of their buddies, he flies in the middle of it, and his face is just covered with blood. And all the bats are like, "Wow, where did you get that blood?" And the one bat says, "Well, I don't want to talk about it." "Oh, come on, you got to tell us, where did you find that blood?" "I don't want to talk about it." "Okay, you don't want to talk about it. Can you at least show us?" "Well, all right. Was it here in the cave? Was it in the cave somewhere?" "No, no, not in the cave. Follow me." So they flew outside the cave. And then so they get outside the cave, and the bats are looking around, and they said, "Is it here in the valley? Is it here in the valley?" One bat says, "No, nope, not here in the valley. Follow me, follow me." So they flew up on top of the hill. The rest of the bats are looking around, and they go, "Where is it? Where is it? Where's the blood? Where's the blood?" "Is it right here?" And then the one bat with the bloody face, he goes, "No, no, not here. Follow me, follow me." So they flew down off the hill, and they came to an interstate. The bats are looking around and goes, "Is it roadkill? Is it roadkill? Where is it? Where is it?" "Not here, not here. Follow me, follow me." So they flew up to the next ridge, and bats are looking around, and the one bat goes, "Look over there. You see that big tree over there?" "Yeah, yeah, yeah. We see it. We see it." "Well, I did it." Crashed into the tree. So, all right. So hopefully you all found those funny. Those are two of my favorite bat jokes. So let's get started. Okay. So, before we get started, if you don't find a way, however you're seeing this video, a way to download the handouts, you can email me, and there's my email address: gmorrowpe @gmail.com. Just email me, tell me that you like the handouts for the Bat Honor, and I'll be more than happy to email them to you. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Batman, yeah. So I have to confess, I grew up loving the show Batman. I find Batman very funny. Um, Batman was really pretty cool. He was the first real superhero that had no superpowers. He was just happened to have a lot of money, which I guess could be considered superpowers. But he was a rich guy, but he was very civic minded. He always wanted to do what was best for Gotham City. He always liked to catch the bad guys. He always had a funny sense of humor. He would make some cracks, and he would always bring the bad guys to justice. And all his toys, the Batmobile, the Bat Phone, the Bat Cave where he lived, and everything. It's just really a funny show, and I liked it a lot. So there's a sidekick Robin there on the side. A lot of you kids probably grew up with the Batman you see on the bottom there. That's Batman talks like this, and he's got some issues he should probably talk over with his therapist, but he's still a good guy, and I like him okay. I don't like him as good as the old Batman, but he's still a good guy. So this is what I think of when first thing that pops in my head when somebody says bat. I think of Batman. Unfortunately, not everybody has good visuals when they think about Batman or thinks about bats. They think about this. There was a novel I think it was 1880 something, that was published called Dracula. And Dracula talked about bats that would suck your blood, and it really scared people. And then once we started making movies in the 1920s or whenever, they started the Dracula movies, and there's been all kinds of Dracula movies. And these bats are really, the Dracula series has really scared people about bats, and I think that's really unfortunate. We're going to find out in this honor that bats are really, really a good animal to have around. We're very fortunate to have them. They're nice and clean. Mice and rats, they crawl in our food, and they poop and pee where they sleep, and they cause all kinds of diseases. And but yet we all love Mickey Mouse and Chuck E. Cheese, but yet somehow bats we're scared of, and that's really turned around. That's unfortunate. So if you do nothing else in this honor, I really hope that you have an appreciation for bats when we finish. Okay. So I want you to start off by saying "aw." Well, one more thing first. I'm a little out of practice. It's been a few months since Oshkosh. I had this thing memorized by the end of the week. True or false? Let's start off with some true or false questions. Most bats have rabies. What do you think? The answer? False. Only 0.5% of bats have rabies. So that means out of 1,000 bats, you would see how many 1%, 10, 5. You'd have 5 bats out of 1,000. So, but when people think about bats, they just automatically think, rabies. All bats have rabies. Well, that's not very fair. There are bats that do have rabies, just like other wild animals in the wild. But bats really have no more, no less rabies than other animals, and we'll talk about that later. How about being around bats can give you rabies? So even if you do have some bats around you that have rabies, can being around them give you rabies? True or false? Answer? False. You actually have to be bitten to be somehow they have to transfer the blood from one bat to another. So that doesn't mean if a bat scratches you or just have you bats. I mean, nurses in hospitals, they'll probably still send you through the rabies sections, but in reality, it's not needed because you actually have to exchange body fluids to body fluids somehow. So they may do that as a precaution, but there is really no need unless you're actually bitten or somehow exchange body fluids with a rabid animal. How about bats need blood to live? True or false? Well, if you pay attention to my joke, there's only 3 species out of 1,300 that actually need blood. So, in fact, you won't find any of them in Wisconsin. I'm not sure about the state. It depends on where you live. But there's vampire bats in Mexico, Central and South America. Somebody at the Oshkosh told me that they can get up in the Carolinas, but I wasn't able to figure that out on the internet. So I'll take their word for it. That may or may not happen. But really, there's only 3 kinds of bats that have blood, that like to drink blood. But unless you're a small, frog or toad or salamander or something like that, wouldn't worry about it. They leave the big animals like humans and dogs and sheep and things like that alone. A couple people try to say, oh, they're pretty sure that they saw a story about bats that ate blood off of sheep, and then the first guy that did it at the end, he showed me a smartphone. He goes, hey, he looked it up, and it's really the bats were eating the insects off of the sheep. They're not really sucking the blood from sheep. Dogs and cats shouldn't be around bats. True or false? Answer: false. Not to say it couldn't happen, but there is not any evidence that bats have ever infected a cat or a dog. So we'll talk more about cats and dogs in a little bit. Last one. So here's a trick question. Bats are dirty animals. What do you think? The answer, have to admit, it's false. Bats are actually very good groomers. So a lot of animals, rabbits and mice, and they'll poop and pee where they sleep. Bats are not that way. Rats will climb through garbage and get all slimy and nasty. Bats are not that way. Bats are very good groomers. If they get something on them, if they can't brush it off of them, they're very social animals. They'll buddy up to their buddy and or their brother or sister, and they'll brush each other off. They're very good groomers. They like to stay clean. Beneath bat boxes are the poop, but they get away from where they actually sleep and eat. So bats are very, very, very clean animals. Okay, now on here you say "ah," a little louder. Ah, right? Okay. So we're gonna play a little game. It's called Who Wore It Cuter. First one. What about the fox? How cute is the fox on a scale of 1 to 10? Or go ah. Okay. What about the baby squirrel? Ah, right? Pretty cute, huh? What about the baby fox? Maybe not. Pretty cute though. What about the baby? Everybody loves puppies. Ah. What about the baby kitty cat? Ah, yeah. Sing loud. What about the baby skunk? Oh, maybe not, but they are pretty cute. Might be stinky when they grow up, but they are pretty cute. Raccoons? Yeah, a lot of people like the raccoons. They're pretty playful. What about the baby bat? Yeah, So I think it's pretty cute. So you may not agree with me that the bat is one of the cutest animals up there, but he's definitely not the ugliest. You know, as far as God gave us a lot of animals to look at in the wild, and I would contend that the baby bat is no uglier, no cuter than all the other baby animals God gave us to look at. So the bats really can be cute, depending on how you look at them. All right. Here's a chart from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So it started in 1966, and the number of cases that they would find of different species or at different animals with rabies, they would document it. So there's the purple animal. It looks like in the 1980s there's quite a few of the purple animals that had rabies. Then it kind of dived back down. Then the red animal kind of took over. Red animal spiked pretty high. The blue animal has been kind of creeping up a little bit over time. And the green animal kind of dived down. It's kind of on the lower end, but still several cases per year. Which one would you be the most scared of? Which color of the animal? Well, here's the answers. The red is raccoons. So, you know, raccoons went through a tough time in the 90s, and they're starting to come back down, not be as rabid as they were. The purple are the skunks. Skunks went through a tough time when there's a lot of skunks with rabies. The bats has been on an upward trend, and the foxes, you know, there's still foxes out there. So the point is, yes, bats have rabies, but so do pretty much all the other wild animals that are out there. And so, you know, people see a squirrel in their backyard, and they don't think twice about letting their dog go chase a squirrel. You know, but somehow they see a bat, and then people freak out that, ooh, it's got rabies. They just assume that it has rabies. In reality, if you see a sick animal, no matter if it's a bat, a skunk, a raccoon, whatever, leave it alone. If it's not feeling good, if it's sick, leave it alone. It's probably sick of something. And bats, because we tend to only really see them when they're sick and not feeling very good. You know, they're not hiding during the daytime, or they're, you know, wherever. But if you find a bat in, say, a cave or under the eaves or in a bat box or in your attic or in your, you know, basement, as long as it's acting like a normal bat, it's probably just a healthy bat. It's not until you see one flopping around on the ground or, you know, being a little lethargic. Some animals, when they get rabies, they get real aggressive, like dog. And these, keep in mind, these are wild animals. So domesticated animals, you know, cats and dogs, or especially dogs, you know, are much higher. They're as far as the number of rabies cases every year. And people let dogs sleep on their bed, right? You invite them in your house and you treat them like a kid, but yet dogs are statistically more likely to have rabies than bats. But people just see a bat and they just, bam, they just assume rabies. So, but if it's not feeling good, leave it alone. It's sick of something, and rabies is a good possibility. But bats have rabies, but so do other animals. So bats are no less opportunity. So I will say that if you ask Alexa which kind of animal has the most rabies, it will say bat. But look there on the end. 2014 is the last chart I had, so I don't know what it's looked like since 2014. But the bats have creeped up over the other animals. But if you look at the overall track record of bats, it's really pretty good compared to some of the other animals. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about bats. If you see a healthy looking bat, it's probably healthy. So, okay. So what is a bat? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it Superman? Or is it a mammal? So let's talk about this. Mammals have hair. Birds have feathers. So do bats have hair or feathers? So here's a picture of a bat that just had a bath. They're brushing it out with a brush because guess what? It has hair. And there's a close-up of a bird. Of course, we all know birds have feathers. Mammals have babies and birds have eggs. So there's some pictures of some pretty cute looking little bats that were just born, or at least they're pretty young. They're baby bats. And then there's a picture of some baby birds. In fact, they haven't been born yet. They haven't hatched yet. When they come out of their mommy, they are in an egg, and they still have to form. When a bat is born, it's born an actual little baby, and it has arms and legs and nose and all that kind of stuff, and it's hungry. When a bird is born, it comes out as an egg, and it still has to form before it can hatch. Mammals, babies nurse. So you are a mammal. So when your mother had you as a baby, she made milk that you could drink. When bats have babies, their babies crawl up on them and they're able to drink milk because their mommies make milk for them. It's called nursing. When a baby bird, after it hatches from an egg, when it's hungry, its mommy grabs, it doesn't have the ability to feed it milk. It goes and it chews up worms and insects and basically spits up in the baby's mouth. That's how baby birds eat. So birds and mammals are both warm-blooded. So here's some examples of pictures where the camera shows based on the temperature. It's really dark if it's cold, and if it's warm, it's light colored. So the upper left-hand corner, what are those? The birds. You can see the birds are warm-blooded. They have heat coming through their heads. The thin parts of their wings, you can see them, and you can see it light up. The lower left, what is that? Looks like a gorilla. So a gorilla, it's a primate like humans, and so they are also warm-blooded. You can see the warm blood flowing through the head and through the chest and the arms and so forth. The lower right, what is that? That would be a scorpion. Now, scorpions are cold-blooded, so the person holding the scorpion behind the scorpion is warm-blooded, so that's why they show up light. But since scorpions are cold-blooded and they don't have blood pumping through their veins like warm-blooded animals, they show up as dark in these photographs. And of course, the upper right, what is that? That's a bat. So you can see that the bats are also warm-blooded. You can see the bat's head. You can see its feet, its legs, its arms, its hands. So it is also warm-blooded. So both birds and mammals are warm-blooded. So mammals have hands and feet or wings. So you and I are mammals. We actually have 4 legs. So we call 2 of our legs arms, but they're basically the same structure as our legs. They're, for the most part, they may be different shape and maybe different size, but they have the same function. They're put together in the same pattern, kind of like the same Legos, if you will, just different size Legos. So birds do not. Birds actually have 2 legs and they have 2 wings, and they're completely separate bone structures. So if I were to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and get a bucket of wings and a bucket of leg bones, thigh bones, and look at them, you would tell that the leg bones are definitely a much different kind and much different structure than the wing bones. And so if you look at the bat here, now the bat, we tend to think, it's got maybe wings, but in reality, when you take a bat apart, and I had one of these at Oshkosh for kids to look at, the wing is actually its hand. So its arm structure is very similar to its leg structure. And the feet and the toes, although they're much smaller than their hands and their fingers, but they're basically the same kind of structure. They just have really, really long fingers on the end of their arms. So bats have feet and hands, and birds have wings. So here's where you start writing on your worksheet. Why are bats classified as mammals and not birds? Well, because bats have fur or hair just like mammals. Check. Birds do not. Bats they bear live young, with the exception of platypus, and birds do not. They're hatched from eggs. Bats, babies nurse from their mother. Baby birds do not. Baby birds are fed from their mommy's mouths. Bats, like all mammals, are warm-blooded, and birds are warm-blooded also. And bats have 4 legs, often with toes or hands and feet. And with the exception of whales and those kinds of mammals in the ocean, all other mammals have legs and feet. Birds do not. Birds have legs, but then they also have wings, which are a completely different structure. So why are bats classified as mammals, not birds? They have fur. They bear live young. They're baby's nurse. They're warm-blooded, and they have 4 legs. So therefore, we can conclude that yes, a bat is a mammal. But bats are unlike all other mammals. How are they? What can they do? They can fly. Bats can fly. Oh, but Glenn, what about the flying squirrel? And I don't think I had a single kid at Oshkosh who didn't know what a flying squirrel, that is, they don't fly. Flying squirrels do not fly. They actually glide. I think everyone knows that. A squirrel actually has to climb up in a tree or a building, and then they jump. And it takes them a long time to reach the earth because they glide, but they continually go down, 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 down. They can't flap their wings and go higher, higher, higher. They continually go down, down, down. Now, to be fair, a bat cannot fly from the ground. If you put them on a concrete floor, a bat cannot fly. A bat actually has to crawl up on something like a wall or a tree or something like that, has to drop. It catches wind beneath its wings, and then it can start flying. So once the bat starts flying, it can continue to fly until it gets tired. It can go as far as it wants until it gets tired. It can keep going up, 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 up until it gets tired. And so flying squirrels cannot do that. So bats are truly the only mammals that can fly. So bats are of the order called Chiroptera. Now Chiroptera, Chiroptera, comes from 2 words, 2 Greek words. Chir means hand, and petron means wing. So a Chiroptera, in essence, means hand wing. So when a bat is flapping its wings, it's actually flapping its fingers. It's opening and closing its fingers. So when you look at a bat wing, there's a little bit of wing around the elbow, but you see its arm, its elbow, its forearm, and then you see its finger sticking out, its little thumb. And then those long pieces that you see inside the wing, that's actually its fingers. Okay, so Chiroptera means hand wing, because bats are basically, they're opening and closing their hands. That's how they fly. So the honor wants you to know about the largest bat you can ever find. And we know it's a flying fox. A flying fox is a type of fruit bat. Sometimes people just confuse them, just call them fruit bats, but fruit bats is kind of a whole category of bats. Flying fox is the largest of the fruit bats. Doesn't that girl who's holding it, doesn't she look scared? Well, she's not. She's no more scared than if she was holding a koala bear or something else, because unless she was a big piece of fruit like a mango or something, or a banana, that bat's not interested in her. The bat's just friendly. So a flying fox lives in Asia and Australia, and it has a 5'7" wingspan. So I'm 5'10". If I were to stretch my arms out, that's about how wide a flying fox is. If it were to stretch its wings out, that's how large they are. But they're pretty docile. They fly around from tree to tree, and they're looking for fruit and nectar and those sorts of things. They don't eat meat. They don't eat flying insects. They're not aggressive eaters, if you will. They like fruit. Okay, so that's the largest the largest bat that we have is the flying fox. It lives in Asia, Australia. The smallest is called the Kitty's hognose bat, and I also like to call it the bumblebee bat. Depending on which island you're from is depending on what they call it. So these bats are very little guys, and I had one at Oshkosh in a little case for people to look at. So it's got a 5-inch wingspan. These live in Thailand, by the way. So it's got a 5-inch wingspan. So if I open my hand, this is about as wide as my hand is. That's how wide their wingspan would be if the bat were to spread its wings out. So called the bumblebee bat, lives in Thailand. It's got a 5-inch wingspan. So that's, as far as we know, that's the smallest one. Having said that, we're finding new bats every year. We're up to over 1,300 bats, and they find 1 or 2 new bats species a year. They're still finding bats. Okay. So bats are divided in 2 suborders. They are called Megachiroptera and Microchiroptera. Now, Megachiroptera, we kind of shorten it. We just call them megabats. I like that name. It kind of sounds like something from Batman, the megabats. And then you got the microbats. Microbats are generally the smaller ones. Megabats are generally the larger ones. Megabats generally use their eyesight. This is not 100%, but for the most part, they use their eyesight. They don't have um, they don't need the ability to chase things because what are they looking for? They're looking for fruit trees. They can find the fruit tree, then they can use their sense of smell to find the flowers that they're looking for in the fruit. So the microchiroptera use something called echolocation. Once upon a time, they had no idea how bats could fly through a room with strings going from wall to wall, and the bat could fly through it perfectly and not touch a single string. So they tried about everything they could think of. They sewed their eyes shut, and the bat could still fly through. They, cut off part of the wings, and they would, had trouble flying, but they could still get through without touching the strings. And it wasn't until they actually plugged their ears that the bats started crashing into everything. And they realized the bats are actually sending out a signal, and when they send out that sound, it bounces back, and they're able to see by listening to the return sound waves. We call it echolocation. So this is the same technology God put in the dolphins and the porpoises. So they're sending out that signal, and they see things in front of them by listening when it comes back to their ears. And man has borrowed that technology in our submarines. So submarines would send out signals, ping, 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 and it would hit an object and come back, and they would be able, by listening to the echo, they call it echolocation, they would be able to figure out what it was seeing. So so which suborder bat uses echolocation? Be the microbats. And which suborder uses eyesight to find their foods? It's mostly the megabats. Okay. So the order Chiroptera, again, the megabats, they eat fruit, nectar, and pollen for the most part. These are really cool photographs, and later I'll actually talk about these photographs. This is something Bob explained to me when we got to Oshkosh. But these are some really cool photographs of some bats doing really cool things. The Microchiroptera, these are generally the insect eating. They like to eat insects. They pretty much have a variety of diets. So they like moths and mosquitoes, and some of them will eat small mammals and birds. But again, so unless you're a small toad or a frog or a salamander, they're going to leave you alone. So, but there's very few of them that actually drink blood. Okay, so for the most part, the diet of the megabats is what? Fruit, nectar, and pollen. And the diet of the microbats is the insects. So you guys know that song you generally sing at camp, I like bananas, I think the mangoes are sweet, I like papayas, but nothing can beat the sweet love of God, right? So you cannot sing that song unless you like bats, because bats are a good pollinator for those kinds of tropics fruits. So just like the honeybee in North America is really good at pollinating most of our crops, when you get Central and South America, they really depend on the bats to pollinate all those fruit trees that we like to eat in the grocery store. Okay. So the order Chiroptera, how many different kinds of bats are there worldwide? So you can put a couple numbers down here. You can either say over 1,000, or specifically it's actually over 1,300. But I still like this picture because over the 1,000 bats that it mentions, it kind of splits it up to let you know how many species are megabats, how many species are microbats. So we found 1,300. So we know that 15 to 20% of them are megabats. But by and large, most of them, 80, 85% of them are microbats. So just wanted to let you know that most of them are microbats. But so you can say 1,000 because that's what this says on this sheet. But in reality, if you look it up, I forget the exact number, but it's over 1,300 bats that we know of. So now that we know how to find bats, they go out and they listen for the bats, and they can listen to the echolocation. They making their noises, and then they listen to those recordings, and they can tell you what kind of bat it is. And when they find new bats and they go find it, they can physically find it. But that's how they find them now. They listen for them. Okay, so a pup is what we call a baby bat. Why? Because they're cute as a pup, right? Pretty cute. Here's some babies. And a mommy will typically only have one pup per year. So this is critical because bats will have twins, but it's rare. They will have triplets, but it's even more rare. And I suppose they can have quadruplets and such, just like people. But they only have one baby per year. So if you think about a lot of mammals, especially the rodents, you have, mice and rats, and you have rabbits, you have puppies and kitty cats. They will have multiple babies per litter, and they'll have multiple litters per year. So one mommy animal can make 6, 7, 10 at a time, and they can be pregnant 4 or 5 times a year. So one mommy could make 50 babies, but that not so with bats. Only one bat typical per family per year. So that's why if something is happening to bats and they're being destroyed or they die or something, that's why it's so critical, because they don't repopulate as quickly as other mammals do. Um, so that's important to know. So there's only babies. So a bat only has one baby per year typically, and their babies are called pups. All right. So the honor wants you to know about 3 texts in the Bible that talk about bats. And best I know, there's only 3 texts. 2 of them are very similar. So in Leviticus 11, what we call the health laws. So these are the birds you are to regard as unclean and not eat because they are unclean. The eagle, the vulture, the bird, 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 the bird. It lists a whole bunch of birds. And at the end, and the hoopie and the bat. So, and in Deuteronomy 14, very similar. It says, you may eat any clean bird, but these birds you may not eat. The eagle, the bird, the bird, the bird, the bird, the bird, the bird, the bird. And the very last one, it says the bat. So Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14 is where you would find bats reference. Now, I want to explain this to you because this is where people who try to disprove the Bible will point to this and they say, see, this is why you can't believe anything in the Bible, because obviously bats are mammals. We did that at the beginning of this lesson. It's pretty obvious they have fur, they're warm-blooded, they're so forth. So why would God put bats in the list of all these birds? Obviously bats are not birds, so therefore you can't believe anything in the Bible related to science. Well, that's not really fair for a couple of reasons. One, there's something called the Linnean classification. Linnean classifications is where they got together one day and they said, okay, here's what it takes to be a reptile. And they would talk about what it means to be a reptile. Here's what it takes to be a mammal. Here's what it takes to be a bird. Here's what it takes to be a, amphibian. Here's what it takes, they would go through all these, figured that out. The problem is for them that they didn't have this conversation until after the Bible is written. So it's not fair for the Bible authors to be held to some arbitrary standard, if you will. Lineage classification, it makes sense, but it wasn't developed until way after the Bible, this part of the Bible is written, after Moses lived. Probably more important reason I want you guys to know about is the Hebrew word that was translated as bird is actually Alf, O-W-P-H, which means a fowl/winged creature. It could also be just a winged creature. And that makes sense. A bat, it's the only mammal that can fly, so why not include it with all the, quote, winged creatures? So it's really not fair to say just because the King James, translated as bird, in reality, the proper verse should have said something like, these are the clean winged creatures you can eat, and these are the unclean creatures you can eat. So I do want you to be aware of that. So the other thing I want to talk about and focus a little bit on is, God was really smart. He really tried to tell us what's best. He laid out what was clean meat and what was unclean meat. This whole virus thing going on now, it's blamed on actually people eating bats. Not to say that all the, I'm going to call it pandemics or plagues are caused by people eating unclean food, but that does have a huge part of it, is when these viruses get from, jump from animal to human, and that's what The humans just don't know how to, our immune system doesn't know how to fight it. So basically what these two verses do mean is that even though I like bats, I think they're great bats. When I come over to your house for dinner, please don't fix me a bat burger. So I love bats, but not to eat bats, because God said these are unclean. He doesn't want me to eat them, and that's what happened. Well, at least what I'm told is what started this COVID-19 virus. So somebody eating unclean meat. So don't be blaming God because of the virus, because man did something God specifically said, do not do this. And we did it. And I say we as humans, we did it. And we're having a tough time dealing with it. So, all right. The third Bible text, people you say, where's verse number 3? Well, it's this one. It's in Isaiah 2:20. This deals with prophecy. This says, in that day, men will throw away to the rodents and bats that are idols of silver and idols of gold, which they made to worship. How do you like this picture of bats in the junkyard? What's the matter? They're not bats, are they? They are rats. They are rats and mice. Or probably rats, I guess, what I would call them. I used to think you could find any picture on the internet. No matter how I use Google, no matter how I use the search terms and search engines, I could not find a picture of a bat in a junkyard. Pretty amazing. I used to think you could find anything on the internet, but if you can take a picture of a bat digging through trash, you can post that to the internet, and you've done something no one else has done. And if you think about bats, they don't like to be nasty and dirty. You know, rats will climb through slimy stuff and get dirty. Bats, you may find them in a junkyard flying over the top of the junkyard, picking off the insects, trying to make the area better because they're eating the insects that are causing nasty viruses and I shouldn't say viruses, but causing disease. But unlike rats and mice that actually dig through the trash, bats won't do that because they're very clean to each other. So, but Isaiah 2:20, basically it is prophecy. It's talking about the last days. Things that we think is important now, in the last days, we're just going to throw them away in the dump. And then that's what it's saying. Okay? All right. So the next question, number 12, do bats hibernate or migrate for the winter? The answer is both. So here's what happens. So bats hang out in the summertime wherever they hang out. And then the wintertime, all the bats from, say, Wisconsin and Kansas City and Kentucky and maybe Oklahoma, they all get together, maybe New York, and they all get together and they hang out in some cave, say, in Pennsylvania. They go into Pennsylvania. It's like a family reunion. So they all get together. Hey, cousin, how you doing? Oh, Junior's growing up pretty strong, isn't he? So they kind of rub shoulders. Again, they're very social animals. They meet each other. It's like a big family reunion. Once they all get there, then they all kind of go sleep. So they hibernate through the wintertime. Springtime, they wake up. All right, it's time to go back home. We'll see you next fall. And they fly off to their respective places. So there are actually hibernation routes. I'm sorry, hibernation routes. There are actually migration routes for bats where you can say, this kind of bat flies from this area to this area, and it generally takes this pathway. So there's something I want you to know. It's not talked about in the honor, but I think it's important for you to know. Those big wind turbines? I used to love watching those things. I think it was great that we're providing wind energy, and I'm not a fan of them anymore. And the reason why, they found out that they were killing bats, and they could not figure out why until just a few years ago. You know why? Because bats are not birds. What are they? They're mammals. So what was happening is, because they're mammals, they would act just like you and I would if we went scuba diving and we came up too quick. If we went from one pressure zone to another pressure zone very quick, you know what would happen? They call it the bends. Basically, the inside of your body can't take the pressure change that quickly, and you could die. You could die if that happens. So what's happening is bats are flying around these wind turbines, and they're looking for insects. And they think, well, why can a bat who could hit an insect at 20 miles an hour, why can't it miss those big arms and just kind of move so slowly? Well, when a bat is flying around those wind turbines, those blades, there's a pressure side where the wind is pushing the blade, And on the back side, there's kind of a negative. So that's where the blade is being pushed to. So there's a high pressure zone, low pressure zone. So when the bat goes flying around those blades, it's going from high pressure zone, low pressure zone, high and low, high and low. And it's like as if you came up and scuba diving too quickly and their insides just explode. So I'm not a fan of the fans because they're really harmful to a lot of different bats. So now when they place wind turbines, they have to look at the migration patterns of bats, and they have to try to avoid that. So birds don't have that problem because birds are not mammals, and birds don't breed like bats and humans do. So that's why it doesn't bother birds, but bats, they really have a tough time around wind turbines, especially some of the species that like to fly around looking for those little insects. So I think it's important to know that. All right, here's the next part for all the smart kids. Oops, no. Well, just to explain about hibernation. So in summertime, sometimes they hang out in good spots. So this is the largest summer home of the largest colony of bats in the world. So these are Mexican free-tailed bats, and they roost in a cave from March to October in Texas. This is thought to be the largest known congregation of mammals. So 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats. There are some cities in China that have 20 million people, but I've never been to China, so I have a hard time visualizing that. But I've been to some of the United States' largest cities. So let's see if I can remember these correctly. So I think the #1 largest city in the United States is New York City. #2 would be Los Angeles. #3 would be Chicago. I believe #4 is Houston. I believe #5 is Phoenix. And #6, I believe, is Philadelphia. So those are the top 6 population-wise, top 6 cities in the United States. If you were to take the inhabitant of all 6 of those cities and get them in one spot, that's what you have here in Bracken Cave in Central Texas. So 20 million bats, 20 million people, all hanging out in one spot. I'd like to go see that someday. Like that'd be kind of cool. I would imagine there's not very many insects are left around Bracken, Texas, when the bats are in town. So here's the slide for the smart kids. So let's see how well you guys pay attention in kindergarten. Okay. So we're going to learn the parts of the bat. Pretty complicated. First one. So at the end of the hand, there's that little part that sticks up. What do you call that? You call that your thumb, or we call it the first finger. Okay. First finger. So the next finger after the first finger is what? Some people call it index finger, but it's called the second finger. The third finger, some people might call it the ring finger, or the middle finger, but it would be the third finger. After the third finger, you see a pattern here? Guess what we call the next finger? The fourth finger, right? Okay, this next one's kind of tricky. I'm going to throw you for a loop. So you get the first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger, and the fifth finger is called something different. It's called the fifth finger. Okay, this next part is actually a part that you and I have, but we don't talk about it very much. But in the identification of bats, is very important. It's this little part in your ear. You see that? We have our earlobes we tend to talk about, but this is called your tragus. 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 Now, tragus is very important in bats because a lot of times that's how they identify different species. It may look like the same kind of bat with the same color of hair and the same size and yada, 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 but they will have different traguses. Some are long and pointy, some are short and flat, some are rounded, they're all different shapes and sizes. But we have one too, we just don't talk about a lot. It's called the tragus. This little triangle part right there, okay? What is that part that hangs down below the body? That would be the leg. Yeah. Let's see how well you pay attention to kindergarten. And what's that thing at the bottom of your leg? It's your foot. Now this next part is something you and I do not have. It's called the calcar, C-A-L-C-A-R. The calcar is basically calcium that grows out from the ankle, and they use that to manipulate the wing, or at least the tail membrane. So bats are like your puppy dog or your kitty cat. They do have a tail, the tail that sticks down from their rear end. And then the membrane around the tail is called the tail membrane. So the membrane around the tail would be the tail membrane. What do you call that part of your leg that bends? In a bat, you call it a knee. That's a real knee slapper, huh? And then the membrane that's above the leg, we actually call the wing membrane. So remember, they don't have wings. This really should be called hand membrane, but we do call it wing membrane. So that part is tricky. And then what do you call this part right here? My favorite answer at Oshkosh was muscle, but it's the forearm. And then parts on the side of the head of the bat, we call the ears. And then the part where a bat would keep his wristwatch was called a wrist. Okay? So hopefully you got all those. But the point here is that bats are like us, only different. They have a lot of the same parts. God used the same Legos, if you will, to put a bat together that he put humans together. We're just different, but we have a lot of the same parts and put us together the same way. So with the exception of the calcar, we pretty much have, and the wing membranes, tail membranes, we pretty much have everything that a bat does. Of course, they have a tail like a lot of other mammals, but we don't. Okay. All right. So how many insects can a bat eat in an hour? So a benefit to man is that they can eat insects. A single brown bat can eat up to 1,200 insects per hour. Think about 1,200 insects. So that's like mosquitoes, that's moths, that's cockroaches, mosquitoes, gnats. During a single night, they would generally eat about 3,000 to 7,000 insects. So if you walk out back of your house and you have a lot of insects and you don't like it, instead of getting all the citronella candles and the heavy insecticides and spraying on everything, getting everybody sick, why not just get some healthy bats? Put up some bat houses for bats to live around your house, and they will help knock out those mosquitoes for you, and moths and everything else that drive you nuts each night. Another benefit to man would be to pollinate and spread seeds. So again, you know, your bananas, your papayas, your mangoes are sweet and all that sort of thing. If it weren't for bats, you wouldn't have all those fruit. Now, this is where I want to show you Merlin D. Tuttle. This is the guy who took this photograph. Merlin was actually an Adventist, went to Adventist universities, and you can Google him and read about him, but he didn't like the fact that all the pictures of bats you see were the Dracula kind, want to suck your blood. Bats are such a cool animal. He made it his life's mission to take photographs of bats and the different kinds of bats, and he shows them, you know, really beautiful pictures. So I took a lot of pictures off the internet, and they were Merlin Tuttle's photographs. And it wasn't until I got to Oshkosh that Bob Moore pointed out to me that who Merlin Tuttle was, and it was really cool. So he's kind of neat to look at. The last benefit to man would be that they provide medical research. So echolocation skills. There's a cool video out there of a guy who's blind, and he rides bicycles blind. He does other things blind, runs around, and you would think he's just a sighted person, but he makes a kind of a knocking noise in his mouth, and he's learned to actually listen just like a bat does, and he knows how to avoid walls and rails and other things and people and so forth. So he doesn't get in trouble. It's amazing to see him ride a bicycle and do that so quickly that he can actually find his way around. So try and teach people to do that. Then there's also a chemical agent in the dreaded Dracula bat we call Draculin, but it's being tested for use in helping stroke victims. Okay, there's your 3 benefits. So the kinds of bats you would find in Wisconsin, they might be similar or even the same as what's in your state. But your state probably has a few that Wisconsin doesn't have, and vice versa. But remember, bats like to migrate, and so they fly through each other. And so I want you to write down what Wisconsin has, but I would challenge you to look up your own home state and try to figure out what kind of bats you can find in your state. Especially when you put up your bat box, it'd be kind of nice to know what kind of bat you're going to get. So the little brown bat, they call him little because he's pretty tiny, and they call him brown. Guess what color the little brown bat is? Pretty smart. Yep. brown, little brown bat. So he's got short, round ears. He likes to live in caves and mines. He likes wasps and moths. So unless you like wasps and moths, you should really like the little brown bat. And again, they eat insects off other animals. People will see that, flying around their dog. If you see this on your dog, it doesn't mean that it's trying to eat your dog. It means that you need to give your dog a bath because your dog probably has fleas and other things on it that the bat is finding very tasty. Okay? So that's the little brown bat. Then we have the big brown bat. We call it big because it happens to be bigger than the little brown bat. Guess what color the big brown bat is? Amazing, yeah, it's also brown, just like the little brown bat. So it loves insects, beetles, flies, stoneflies, mayflies, true bugs, net-winged insects, scorpion flies, cat flies, and cockroaches. So it loves flies. So these are the most common in Wisconsin. They love to, so if you're going to find a bat around Wisconsin, it's probably one of these guys, bat boxes. If you put a bat box up at Oshkosh, chances are the bat that would find it as a home would be the big brown bat. Okay. Next we have, this is probably my favorite looking bat. He's a northern long-eared bat. He's just got ears. They're not quite as big as mine, but he looks pretty inquisitive. He's got long ears. Caves and mines are where he likes to hang out, and bat boxes in the summertime. He is endangered. He's got a couple of things going against him. One, the wind turbines that we talked about. He is really affected by the turbines. He likes to fly around the blades, and it's not a good outcome. And then he's affected by something we call the white nose syndrome. So I'm going to explain what that is in a little bit. This is the eastern pipistrelle, or also called the tricolor bat. So this guy, seemed like every picture I could find of him, it looks like somebody told him the funniest joke. It looks like he's in a comedy club and he's just laughing because he just heard the funniest joke and he just can't stop giggling. So that's his face, but his hair looks like a lady that likes to go visit the beauty parlor way more than she should. Every hair is 3 different colors. You know the kind of ladies I'm talking about who have that look. So when you look at each hair on an eastern pipistrelle, also called tricolor bat for 3 colors of hair, each hair is black at the base, it's yellow in the middle, and brown on the tip. So that's why it gives it kind of the weird looking look that it looks like. So there's a whole bunch of pipistrelles hanging out together, but I just like the picture of him. He just looks like he's laughing, having a funny time. All right, there's also something called the silver-haired bat. So that's kind of like me. He's got dark hair, but a lot of gray on tips. So he's a tree bat. He loves being out in the woods. Because he's not so much in the city, he's exposed to a lot more of the, if you will, the wild animals. So if you have a species of bat that's probably more common to have rabies, it's probably this guy, because he's exposed to a lot more wildlife out in the woods than your typical bat who likes to hang out around houses and such. So he's called the silver-haired bat. The next bat is called the hoary bat. And the hoary bat, I don't know why, it just always reminds me of a sloth hanging out. He's got a kind of a grin, silly, slow grin on his face, and he likes moths. So moths do a lot of damage to our trees and such. And so he's dark brown with white tips, pretty big bat. He likes moths. I'm glad he likes moths because I'm not a big fan of moths. Then we have the eastern red bat. Guess what color he is? He's not brown. Not brown. Don't guess brown again. He's red. Brick red. His back is brick red or rusty red and frosted with white. And his ears are short and rounded. So if you see a red bat, he's probably the eastern red bat. Okay? You got all those? Now, like I told you, I want to tell you about the white nose syndrome. So the white nose syndrome is actually a fungus. It looks like the bat dipped his nose in powdered sugar when he was trying to eat a donut or something. But it's not powder. It's actually a fungus that grows on his nose. And this is what's been called the biggest threat to bats that we have. So probably even more so than all the wind turbines. So what happened was, and you could blame cavers for this. They didn't do it on purpose, but they would go from cave to cave. And I used to go caving when I was a kid. If you've ever been caving, you know that you get dirty clothes. You go traipsing through mud and crawling on your belly and, you know, shimmying among walls and such and everything. So when you get out of the cave, you tend to have your caving clothes and your clean clothes. And so, you come out of the cave and you change into clean clothes. And so you may or may not, wash your clothes. And in fact, you probably don't wash your equipment. You just all goes in the trunk in a big box or maybe a big bag. Next weekend, you go to another cave and you pull out your same clothes or your jacket that hasn't been washed and you go through another cave. Well, what was happening is cavers would be exposed to this fungus, and then they would go from cave to cave to cave to cave. And they would basically be spreading this fungus from bat to bat to bat to bat. So you might have an area of the country where all the bats got this fungus. And then what happens in the wintertime? They migrate and hibernates, right? So they go off to their family reunion place in Pennsylvania or wherever. And so they all huddle up. And then so this cousin gives the white nose syndrome to all of its cousins. In springtime, they wake up and they all go back to their own caves in different locations across the country. And it just spread like crazy. And there for the longest time, a lot of caves are closed because they were trying to keep the bats, they're trying to keep this from spreading. And I think they've finally started making an upswing on it, but it's still not very good for the bats. The white nose actually doesn't kill the bat itself, but it weakens its ability to fight off diseases. It makes it wake up in the springtime earlier, so it starts burning energy sooner. It has to eat more bugs to maintain and so forth. So they don't necessarily die of white nose, but it causes them in a weakened state that they do die of other things. So it's not very good for bats. If you are a caver or if you know of some friends or cousins that are cavers, please beg them to make sure that they clean their equipment really, really good and wash their clothes between caves. Don't carry a fungus from one cave to another. It's not good for the bats. Okay. So to finish the honor, you have to put up a bat house and watch it for 3 months. That's what the honor says. I had some Pathfinder directors in Oshkosh tell me that to finish up the honor, they took their kids to a zoo and watched bats for a half hour and then had them talk about things that they noticed. I think that's a great idea to do, but that's not what the honor asked for. It's really good to put up bat boxes because we love bats so much. We want to create habitat for the bats. So I do like the zoo idea to go out and do, but I really encourage you individually or as a group to build a bat box. You can find lots of instructions on how to build one. And then you can also find lots of instructions on the internet. Your state DNR probably has information on how to hang them. But for the most part, here's what you need to know. Bats, for the most part, like hot places. So they live in caves, but that's really the only places they can be left alone. If you gave them a nice hot place, warm place, they would much rather be there. Try to put it under the eaves of your house. Basically, what I'm saying is try to keep it dry. So they will hang out in caves, but they really prefer someplace dry. That would be ideal. So if you put up a good habitat for them, they would much rather go to your bat box than they would go to a cave. Sunny location on the east or south side of your house. Again, they like that warm sun, but don't put it around lights. So don't hang it around a street light. They like to eat insects around lights, but they are animals of the night. They like it. They like to know when it's dark and so when they can come out. So if it's light all the time outside of their box, it messes up their rhythm. Guano area. Does anybody know what guano is? I know some of you, I'm sure, do, but guano is basically bat poop. Bat poop is highly desirable for fertilizing flowers. You can go to some of your good flower places and you can find guano. It's called guano, but it's basically bat poop. It's very rich in all the nutrients that plants love. Even though guano is really good for flower beds, it's not good for your dad's car paint job. So I would encourage you to pay attention to where you put a bat box. It would be a good place to plant flowers and things underneath it because the guano drops and it fertilizes the soil. Make sure you don't put it over, like, say, a driveway where somebody would park their car, because they might get upset if bats pooped all over their car and then cause the damage to their car. So along forest and water edges, remember, bats love insects. With a quarter mile of water, again, that's because they're looking for insects. And why would you keep a bat box away from trees, or tree limbs especially? So when a bat is most vulnerable is when it's dropping and starting to fly. Once it starts flying, it can escape almost anything, but it's pretty vulnerable when it just drops and it's trying to catch that air underneath its wings before it can start flying. Well, if you put a bat box in a place where it's not very safe, like your parents, they don't buy a home or apartment where it's not safe if they had their preferences. So they don't want a big hawk just kind of waiting there, waiting for a baby bat to come out, bat snack to come out. Or they also don't want a raccoon to go up in there and reach up in a box and pull a bat out and eat it. So they, just like your parents want to put you in a safe environment, bats' parents are the same way. They're very particular with the kids. Remember, they only have one baby a year, so they want to keep their baby bats safe. So that's why you want to be careful how you position it in around tree branches and such. Okay. So people might say, yeah, there's no sense putting a bat box up at our house because we don't have bats. Well, our neighbor tried to put a bat box up and did. Well, maybe your neighbor didn't put it up right, but for the most part, bats are pretty much found everywhere, at least in the United States, and then subtropics are, again, look at your DNR and try to figure out locations where you could actually, how they recommend that you position the bats, how you size the bat box, and how you locate it. But do try, if not for your house, maybe up at church, put some bat boxes up, or maybe you donate your bat box to your local summer camp when you go there, and you can help them put it up somewhere. But I do encourage you to finish up the honor, build a bat box, or buy a bat box and assemble it and put it up somewhere, and try to encourage bats to come live there. But going to a zoo and watching bats is really cool. I like to do it, but part of the honor says let's create some habitat for bats. Okay, so if you do that, if you put up a bat box, you've completed the requirements of the honor. Just show your club director this worksheet and tell them how you put a bat box up, and you're golden. Okay, so again, I don't expect that all of you were as excited to learn about bats as Mike from Southern California, but hopefully you have a good appreciation for bats that you didn't have before you started this presentation. So if you have any questions, again, if you want to see a copy of the worksheets or anything, email me, gmorrowpe@gmail.com. And if you're interested to know about bats in your area, check out your state Department of Natural Resources, or just Google bats in whatever state you're in. And I'm sure there's some information out there to encourage you, because bats really are a good animal. They're so misunderstood, and they're very, very beneficial to man. I'm so glad that God gave them for us to put on this earth. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and well, God bless. Bye.